Welcome back to the channel, all you beautiful people of Hexaco. It's good to see you again. I know it's been some time, but I had some life stuff to take care of, and so it was a lot of fun. But now I'm back. I'm ready to get back on the grind again. You know, gotta hype the people up before pulsechain testnet, before pulsechain mainnet, and just enjoy this little pump that we're on, and hope that it continues a little bit farther, maybe 10 to 12 cent range, based on liquidity. We'll talk about all that today. But you guys know Ben. I interviewed him about 3 weeks ago. Newer YouTuber with a lot of experience in traditional finance and pretty good experience in crypto too, from a VC standpoint. So if you haven't watched our previous interview, make sure you check that one out. But for people that don't know Ben, let's introduce you again, Ben.
Well, thanks for having me back on. And hopefully there's a lot of hyping to be had, a lot of stuff going on in the crypto world right now. But great to be back on the channel. For any of you who haven't followed my channel or not too experienced with myself, as Matt mentioned, I have some experience in the VC space, a lot of traditional finance, and really my mentality on this, or the lens that I'm looking through, is really to marry those two things. I think that nowadays the synergy between both traditional finance and crypto is getting increasingly tighter. And I think that hopefully you get some value from my perspective on certainly the crypto landscape going forward.
Yeah, it's in crypto, we all kind of have to be a VC in a way. When you get to a certain point, so first of all, when you start off, it's all about just making it to financial freedom. It's about being very, very careful, putting all your eggs literally in one basket or a couple of baskets. It goes against common wisdom. Warren Buffett, he says, don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Right.
Well, he's already rich. Okay. And a lot of you guys are not. So, I mean, coming from a rich person's perspective, yeah, you do want to start to diversify after you already have your basic needs met. But alternative to that, and it sounds contrarian, but you really do, when you're starting out in crypto, you want to put all your eggs in a few baskets and watch those baskets very, very closely. And, shift around if you see things, maybe the ship is sinking and you need to put some assets from here to there. But you shouldn't be, diversified too much, especially in crypto. I think diversification in crypto is somewhat of a myth, because unless you're in the Hex and pulsechain ecosystem, which is strongly a lot less correlated than every other asset, all these things go up and down together. So you're just buying a bunch of assets that all move up and down together. It's what you should really be asking is which ones are going to pump the hardest, which ones are going to shine and outperform, and even more importantly, survive on a long-term time frame. So that tricks up a lot of people. But after you do have a nice little nest egg, so to speak, and you can afford the ability to quote unquote diversify or whatever, yeah, then you can start to be thinking from the lens of a VC, which is new to me, right? I have to be very selective about where I put my money. After Hex and pulsechain and PulseX, there's very few projects that I've actually, sacrificed for or invested in, whether it be seed round or whatever. I can probably count on my two hands the projects I've actually invested in. So it's less than 10, but
Totally agree. And I think that most of us, the harsh truth is we can't afford to diversify too much. We don't have enough money. Some of the dreams that everyone has in this crypto world, and it's great timing, and those dreams are justified. But the importance of doing your own due diligence and, doing a good market analysis, the same recipe we used to use in the VC, well, it's still used in the VC realm. Make intelligent, tactful decisions. And then you kind of have to take a leap of faith and put as many of your eggs in those baskets. And why wouldn't you if you have so much conviction about it? Which is why it's important to keep abreast of all of this stuff, keep watching a lot of different viewpoints in this space and make your own decision. But I completely agree. I think the harsh reality and the thing that a lot of people seem to not really compute too much is that in order to see some significant returns, you've got to have some significant skin in the game. And that significance is relative to, of course, your own net worth, your own money. But if you only have
money to make money, right? It takes money to make money. It's a classic age-old wisdom, which is like, well, duh. But what does that really mean? It's like you work your 9 to 5, you grind it out for a little bit, and it's going to suck. You're going to need to work for money, but hopefully not for your whole life, because you should be dollar cost averaging into assets that can put you into that capital class. Because just being a wage cuck for your whole life, you're never going to be above water. You're always just going to be trying to breathe and just trying to barely get by, especially in this hyperinflationary environment that we're going through.
Well, on that note, I mean, I for anyone watching now who is maybe looking for a little bit of hopium, This really is perfect timing. I think that, in order to realize some of those dreams, in order to see a lot of the returns that, the mythical returns we've heard about in the past, and the very kind of unique opportunities that a lot of people have taken advantage of, but we kind of wished we had got involved in. My perspective right now is extremely bullish, and there's a number of reasons why, but I wanted to jump in because I've had some pretty behind the curtain conversations as of late with certainly some of my network. And as I say, I come from traditional finance. I come from the VC space. A lot of my network are working with a lot of the biggest institutions in the world, a lot of the market leaders, certainly institutional wise. And so there's a lot of things happening right now that I wanted to bring everyone up to speed with, just so you can kind of look through this lens and actually truly understand the opportunity that's ahead of us. I'll start with giving you a little bit of context. Now, some of you may, if anyone is here from my channel, which I hope you are, you may have seen me talking about in the past. And Matt, correct, let me know if you haven't heard of me talking about this before. But very recently, the biggest hedge fund, or the biggest asset manager in the world, BlackRock, they put their, or I should say, their biggest, baddest ETF, CSPX. It's arguably the most important ETF in the marketplace. And let me set the context too. BlackRock has trillions of dollars assets under management. This particular ETF has billions of dollars in it. And so that ETF has been tokenized, and it's available to trade on Uniswap, which is monumental. Now, I will caveat this by saying that the ticker symbol is CSPX. So it's not yet available easily to trade within the US. We all know, if we've been in the crypto market for more than 5 minutes, it's nothing that a VPN can't kind of circumvent. But in a larger scale of things, it isn't yet available here. And I'll tell you why. And it's because of the SEC. Because the SEC, while this process of tokenizing their ETF is certainly something that, again, circumvents the legal process. It's not so much an underlying tech thing. It is a legal thing that they now are able to relatively streamline that tokenization process. There's a lot of projects and platforms we can talk about later in terms of who are kind of leading the charge in accomplishing this. But essentially what it means in a nutshell is that despite not right now being available in the US for people without a VPN who aren't, creatively minded, it does open up a huge realm of infinite possibilities in traditional finance vehicles being introduced to crypto. We were looking for a catalyst, and I've said this before, we were looking for a major catalyst to bring huge amounts of traditional finance into the crypto space, huge amounts of capital, and this very much is it. And so a lot of my conversations over the last week and a half, this is a relatively new thing. This has just kind of happened. And we've had, I'll say this too. We've had the ability to tokenize, assets in the past, but we haven't had a crypto landscape that has really been equipped to deal with it. I think now,
yeah, we've had, sorry to interrupt, but we've had security tokens for a while. It's just,
exactly,
you're right that nobody's really, I think there's only 3 or 4. This might be the 4th ever existing security token. Shout out to Mad.Energy. That's another one. But yeah, nobody wants to go to the US or even take a risk of making a security token because they don't know what the hell is going on with the SEC.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that now, the CEO of BlackRock actually came out, and he's a voice to listen to. I know a lot of people seem to view BlackRock as this big bad kind of entity that, at the end of the day, they're a market leader. They're a voice to be heard, and they're a voice to be paid attention to. And whether we like it or not, a lot of financial institutions will follow their lead. If they're making an inroad into crypto, it's definitely kind of smoothing out the path for a ton of other banks, institutions, fund managers, all to follow suit. And so the CEO, Fink, he mentioned that he sees the next generation of finance being focused around tokenization, which is huge. And the fact that now, and we've talked about this before in our last stream, just the importance of decentralization going into the next cycles and the importance that that's going to play. Well, now these financial institutions are, I'm sure they've seen the benefits for a while, but they are publicizing the fact that decentralized finance is going to be the vehicle that they're able, or the facilitator, to bring a lot of that assets into the crypto space. And so, for anyone, any ecosystems, let's say, that are involved in, a very decentralized ethos, it's going to be massive. And it's, this is really is one of those floodgates opening situations. And it's only a matter of time until the US grasp this as well. We can talk about too. I mean, as we're talking about the US and the SEC and whatnot, there's some of the conversations that I've been having recently. There's a lot of motivations, right, behind jumping into this new tokenized landscape in a various different ways. I'm sorry, with both feet, because it really makes sense to grasp this by the horns. Really, if you're a fund manager and you're looking for new creative ways to create revenue while also leveraging the existing securities and assets that you have, this is it. And so, we've got the BRICS summit coming up in August, right? For anyone not familiar with the BRICS countries, it's basically a lot of developing countries: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Kind of like the second tier countries in relation to the G7 summit. So all the developed countries. But there's been an issue for a while, with these developing countries. By whatever, I think it's either 2030 or 2050, they're said to be the leaders in manufacturing, right? They have a big voice. China being a part of that total GDP of the global GDP is like 33%. It's huge. For the first time ever, this has been a conversation point for a while, they are now talking about a change-up of the global reserve currency, which is, of course, the US. Now, this is going to be a lengthy battle, right?
Well, Iran, I think I just read in the news, actually, that Iran just made a deal with China so that their contracts can be settled in yuan, their particular petrol, just that two-way street, not necessarily
Argentina
the
too,
world.
yeah.
And Argentina as well. So it's happening right now. But before we get off this whole topic, I think I want to try to clarify for people that might not think this is a big deal, why it is a big deal. I mean, it kind of reminds me of when Coinbase went public in a way, because it basically legitimized crypto in the eyes of the traditional, boomers, the powers that be, whatever you want to call them. And now we have a stock ticker on the stock market that tracks a crypto company, the first ever, right? Coin. Obviously, I'm not telling anybody to invest in that stock. It performs like shit. And, the early, Brian Armstrong and all the C-suite are probably just going to dump it on your head forever. But this is the next generation. Okay. So you basically said I'm trying to understand this. You basically said BlackRock, which is BlackRock a US company?
They are. Yeah. All
right. So BlackRock as a US company is launching well, it's going to be a centralized coin, obviously, but it's going to be an ETF that exists in a tokenized securities fashion that you can buy on Uniswap, and probably not able to buy on Uniswap in the US for now, but pretty much worldwide, obviously. Yeah. It's only a matter of time because they want some of that money. And so this is kind of an example where like it's almost like BlackRock realized, okay, we can't stop crypto. How do we get our tentacles in there to kind of siphon some of the money that is in crypto into our ETF, right? And so it's looking like
opens up opportunities for people who otherwise wouldn't be able to get into these securities, right? So their ETF, you don't have to be accredited, you don't have to be born in a certain geographic location or based out of a certain geographic location to get involved in these ETFs. But this venture, I mean, there are already a lot of institutions like HSBC, the European Bank. There's a bunch of people already following suit, looking to tokenize their own currencies even. This opens the doors for companies to tokenize equity, their own assets, their own IP. You imagine Elon Musk is going to jump on this bandwagon and Tesla start rolling out various actual tokenized versions of their own? Of course they will.
I think people listening, though, need to understand that we're not shilling these coins and saying go buy these security tokens. We're saying that look what's happening with the general sentiment of the world economy that's going on. Yeah, the SEC, they're running around. They have no idea what they're doing. They might stifle innovation in the US. I mean, it's going to be unfortunate if they do, but on a global scale, everybody wants to get into crypto. Everybody wants to get a little piece. And it's almost like they're saying, if you can't beat them, join them, right? Or like, yeah, we're granting opportunities, right? Of course they're going to say that, but they're also basically just saying, hey, if you can't beat them, join them. Why don't we launch our ETF on a decentralized exchange? And somebody wanted to know in the chat, what's the abbreviation? Was it like 6 letters long?
For the ticker symbol?
Yeah, that's the ticker symbol.
It's BSCPX is the
BSCPX. Okay, that doesn't really roll off the tongue.
Yeah, it's putting a B in front of the CSPX ticker symbol, for their ETF. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, this, I mean, and as much as they, there's a certain amount of messaging going behind this in terms of opening opportunities, just for people to understand, it really does too. There's a lot of revenue, a lot of capital that could be injected into crypto that otherwise wouldn't be, because a lot of people are more conservative, right? We're still in the phase right now where cryptocurrency in general is still viewed by early adopters as much as anything else. This will add a lot of stability to crypto in general, let alone if we start going down the path of pegging it against Bitcoin or Ethereum or some of the real tenured cryptos. But
well, look, I
there's a
mean, it
lot
just
of
legitimizes things in the eyes of the traditional finance people, which we got to get out of our echo chamber sometimes and realize that the reason that 99% of people, well, probably like 95% of people in the world are not in crypto is because they think crypto is FTX, or they think crypto is, they hear Bitcoin went down 80%. Oh, I'm not going to touch that. If they hear something familiar, like, oh, the BlackRock ETF that's on the blockchain now, maybe they're going to be more inclined to go buy that. And once their money's in the ecosystem, that's what it's all about, guys. And these are the people with actual money. Now, basically, like what I'm taking from this is you want to get in before this all happens, because a lot of the opportunity is going to be gone after institutional money pumps all of our bags, essentially, at the end of the day. So it's really good news, but it's also like, hurry up and get in, right? Because you don't want to be buying the top after BlackRock has already, infiltrated, DeFi.
And there are more motivations to get in. So aside from BlackRock getting in there, right, and a lot of banks and institutions following suit and bringing their assets over to this landscape in whatever geographic location, again, VPNs are magic. But before even aside from all of this, there are so many other motivations for these fund managers to get involved, whether directly bringing their assets into play or whether just taking parts of their fund and investing into existing platforms and protocols, just because they see the writing on the wall in terms of how much interest and economic energy is coming into crypto. Just a sample set that I've taken, right? And I'm speaking to a lot of contacts of mine that I've known for a while, some I really trust, who have been, and I'd love to be able to name names right now as much as I can. I don't know what the backlash potentially is for giving information to, out there as, kind of these private conversations. But I will tell you this. A lot of these motivations, firstly, it coincides nicely with this summit, where whether they start to agree or push forward dramatically on this new global reserve currency, the fact that the conversation is out there is extremely important, and it's moving things in a way that are forcing people, certainly within the US, to start putting their attention into crypto. Because ultimately, if as right now, the US is the global reserve currency, any inflation that has been caused by the US, we've kind of been able to offset that by pushing it out to, on the global front. That may stop, whether it's in next year, the next 10 years, whatever it is, that's going to stop, and it's going to force people to take preemptive action, certainly from an investment perspective. And so that's part of the planning phase as well. But then we also have a lot of tech advancements coming to the market that are also motivational for these institutions and these VCs, because if you imagine AI and ChatGPT put AI on the radar for a lot of people in a way that it really wasn't before, right? If anyone is familiar with ARK Invest, Kathy Wood has been talking about the importance of data acquisition, and even connecting the dots between data acquisition and crypto. A lot of the motivation for these asset managers is in putting crypto into existing ecosystems that have the capacity to collect very unique data sets that can then be applied to AI purposes, or draw information via AI means. And so it's a bit of an indirect path, but what it means is that certainly something like a Richard Hart ecosystem that is vertically integrated, that's going to have a lot of control, a lot of transparency. And if you're a new investor coming into the market, obviously, when you're bringing traditional assets to the table, your first port of call is probably going to be Ethereum. It's probably going to be Uniswap from a decentralized perspective, because quite simply, they're the most trustworthy right now from a more conservative approach. However, the exciting thing is, and I'm being a little bit sporadic here, so apologies, but the exciting thing is, from the sample set that I have taken over the last week and a half since a lot of this news came to fruition, I have been almost drained in having conversations with these folks and educating them on what's kind of coming down the pike with pulsechain, with pulsex. And let me tell you this, it hasn't been a difficult sell. If you imagine that we are going to see, without a shadow of a doubt, a lot of economic energy fly into Ethereum and Uniswap. For the more conservative investors out there, who once we were looking at these tokens and seeing perhaps Ethereum will do a 5 to 10x in the next bull cycle, maybe if we follow the cycles. I think if this keeps playing out the way it is, that is not bullish enough. I think that we can kind of throw that to the side, knowing that we're going to have the biggest influx of traditional finance into crypto than we've ever seen before, way sooner than we thought it was going to happen. And so for anyone out there who is looking for maybe a bit more of an easy play, Ethereum may be it. Uniswap may be it. For monumental gains, we take a fraction of that Ethereum, of that Uniswap interest, and we apply that to the Richard Heart ecosystem, which is fresh out of the blocks, which has way better tokenomics for certainly on the PulseX side, and it's important to note too, it's not going to be, in terms of a chain, the fastest or the cheapest probably, but it's still going to be faster and cheaper than Ethereum. And with that whole system state copy, it sounds like a natural next step in investments, right? And so the conversations that I've been having have really been based around how these fund managers, how these VCs intend to leverage this going forward, and how they could potentially use the Richard Heart ecosystem. And I cannot contain my excitement, because this has shown me that we really can see some monumental gains in this ecosystem. They're talking about avenues that veer outside of just simply bringing their assets over, right? If you're a fund manager and you think that a lot of banks, you can already see the writing on the wall. We can see a lot of institutions directly bringing over and tokenizing various assets, let alone private companies tokenizing all of their IP and all of that stuff. There is significant opportunity to be made in direct investments into these platforms and protocols, one of which that's come up in a big way has been node operations. And so, a lot of the folks I've spoken to, one of their first go-tos has been in creating new and creative, financial vehicles or, asset vehicles around node operation, which means not only, validation, not only trying to acquire as many nodes, but building funds, building platforms and protocols based off of that node operation. And so this in itself opens up a whole new realm of possibility. And for a brand new ecosystem, for one like the Richard Heart, where nodes certainly are going to be cheaper, or node validation is going to be a lot more cost effective, they can take out a way bigger piece of that pie right out of the gates, which, as you can imagine, is only going to shoot price of PulseX, of pulsechain up to the moon, in terms of where we're expecting it to go. We don't know in terms of time frame, what this is, how this will have a knock-on effect to the general public. But even just that institutional money coming in and the sheer volume of it in comparison to early adoption and retail investors should make for some super exciting times ahead. So that was an eye-opener the last couple of weeks for me, and just kind of hearing their takes, because some of that was news to me, right? I never would have thought of having that be a direct way in. And a lot of them, without me even bringing up the node operation side of things, it was a theme. And I spoke probably to about 12 or 13 people over the course of a week and a half, all people that I know and trust. And this opened my eyes a lot, to be quite honest with you.
Well, I'm glad there's people like you in the ecosystem that are connecting these big money players from traditional finance, or maybe just a more conservative way of thinking, into the new crypto ecosystem. A lot of us in crypto, myself included, we're all about, there's a whole ethos kind of like sticking it to the man, or fuck the banks, fuck Wall Street and all that. But, at the end of the day, that's kind of like the final phase.
There's no need to.
Right. That's kind of like the final phase to pump your bags, right? But when we're all in this ecosystem together, it's like that meme, right? It's like the meme of like Morpheus and Neo, who's like, they're like, what if I told you, or like, what is it? It's like, maybe one day I'll have enough hex to buy a mansion, and then Morpheus is like, what if I told you that one day when hex is $100, you won't have to sell your hex. It's like, when we're all playing in this ecosystem together, we've basically won, and we've achieved the mission that crypto was set out to do in the first place. So, I mean, this is kind of just the natural progression of things. I feel like this is just the way things are going. Especially, and Richard Heart is onto this. Yeah, Richard
is waiting for something like this to happen. So it's been in the making for a while, but this is just something that really can open the floodgates in a huge way.
Yeah, and you can't ignore the way that the world works, and something that Richard Heart is really in tune with too, because he comes from a business background. He comes from, he knows high people and rich people in high places, and that's why he's making pulsechain the next evolution of Ethereum. He designed Hex to be the next evolution of Bitcoin. When this big money comes in, and when Bitcoin and even Ethereum become a little bit stale, people are going to want to go to the newer, better thing that's faster, cheaper, better user experience, better apps built on top of it. That's going to be the pulsechain network. So, I mean, pulsechain really is a better Ethereum. PulseX really is a better Uniswap. And then Hex, believe it or not, this is going to make the Bitcoin guys roll over in their grave. Hex is a better Bitcoin. And that's what it was set out to do.
For sure.
These are
That's
lofty
part of the
goals.
conversation too. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's kind of an easy way to pitch it too, right? To VCs and people that already understand the basic, premise of what these things are. And it's going to be great. I mean, it's nice to know that serious players are really looking at it, but it's even nicer
100%
to know that
serious.
we as retail are still so early. Like something about these big players, and correct me if I'm wrong, but they need time. They don't just chuck their money in on day one. They need like a year or two to really, at least to see, okay, is it working? Is it going to break? Because they don't want to throw millions of dollars into something on day one. They
need
do need a
sign-on.
little bit of time.
So here's a kind of a glimpse behind the scenes then and what goes on in certainly the VC space and definitely, the trading floor, let's say. It's a little different with hedge fund management because, I guess the guys pulling the trigger are a little bit closer to the ground floor just because they have to. We're talking about billions of dollars a lot of time. But what I'll say is this: when an idea comes.
Uh-oh. Hold up. I think we might have lost him. You guys still hear me?
What's that?
Oop, hold on, Ben. Okay, wait. I think you're back.
There we go. Sorry, I'm not sure where I lost you then.
Yeah, no, I can hear you now.
Well, what I was going to say is it's not usually the people with the creative ideas who want to pull the trigger who are the decision makers in this point, right? And if we're talking about something like the opportunities that are coming, it's going to require quite a bit of capital from, quite a big percentage, relatively speaking, from any of the funds that they're managing. And so they're going to need to have that signed off. And there are multiple people always in that sign-off process. And they're always looking for one of the biggest indicators, which is longevity. And of course, you do the same, the same algorithm takes place, right? You want to have somewhat of a proof point, whether that be return on investment or just the various kind of partnerships and technological kind of infrastructure that's in place, the leadership, all of that stuff we've mentioned before. But ultimately, it's going to come down to time in the market, as we've heard about, even from a decision-making perspective. And while certainly for a lot of those direct tokenized ETFs and everything, it may not be an easy port of call to come over to a new infrastructure. For some of the more direct, kind of like the node operations or the new financial vehicles that are being created in potentially new ecosystems, that's a much easier sell. And having Hex as a store of value for a lot of this stuff will make the world of difference from, I'm sure there are tax loopholes and incentives that we can't even kind of calculate ourselves when you're a corporation working at that level. But I think that, the conversations that I have had mean very good things for Hex as well, if that sample set is to be taken on a much wider scale. And the network effect too. I mean, we've talked about this before as well. I think that what's going to set ourselves apart from being so able to ride the coattails of an Ethereum, just due to the way that, the inception of this ecosystem. So we are the next point, port of call for some of these investments. I also think that the community that we have and that network effect is going to play a huge role. Even the 11 or 12 people I spoke to, I'm sure they're going to speak to other people too. And before you know it, it's, it's hundreds of people, thousands of people, right?
People don't realize that this network that we're building, it's all walks of life. It's everybody. It's not just fucking trailer trash people like Eric Wall wants you to believe. We know we have some high people in high places, and shout out to trailer trash people. I love you guys too. But the network effect is directly correlated to the price, and that's just a fact, right? Like the rising tide lifts all ships. So once these big money players get in, and you guys should be lucky, right? You should feel lucky that they're not VCs. They got in after. Like this is where retail gets to be the VC. Pulsechain didn't sell out to VCs, vulture capitalists, right? Because what do? They just dump on your head as soon as they get liquidity to do so. This is the inverse, right? And Richard did that for a reason. He made the sacrifice set short. He made it kind of not discreet, but he wasn't blowing it up on mainstream news channels. And honestly, the controversy around Hex probably helped a little bit with that too. It probably scared off some of the any of the bigger players at the time. But it's only a matter of time before they flood in, whether it's 1 year or 2 years after Pulsechain launches, maybe 3 years. People are going to dip their toes in the water, and again, the rising tide lifts all ships. But I want to ask you, you talk to some big players, right? You talk to some high people in high places.
A mixed bag, to be honest with you. Some are higher than others, but yeah, I mean, it's a good sample set, to be honest with you, in terms of
and that's amazing. So I'm curious from your perspective, what is their kind of take on the general market sentiment, right? What are they thinking about? Inflation, World War III potentially on the table, God forbid, right? Knock on wood. And the next bull market, is it just are they thinking, just like all of us, 2025, and then we're good to go?
Absolutely. Well, I think that so there's a number of variables involved in this, right? And I think that that's kind of why I brought up the BRICS summit in terms of the global reserve currency, because that is on the mind of a lot of investors right now, certainly a lot of asset managers, because we've all seen what happened with COVID. We all saw, when China, one of the biggest kind of producers in the world, they kind of shut down a lot of options, and shit hit the fan in a lot of places around the world due to globalization nowadays. And so, a lot of these folks too saw similar things happen with Russia, Ukraine, and Russia being such a big energy provider to a lot of countries around the world. If the US is not able to keep a comfortable hold of being that US of being that global reserve currency, for instance, it doesn't bode extremely well for obviously the dollar in general. But of course, this will be a bit more of a lengthy process in terms of switching over. If we do, it'll probably, the questions coming up, I'll say, to cut to the chase, are firstly, if a new global currency or a new global format in that kind of world comes to fruition, are we going to be able to firstly have that take form in the crypto space, which I think we probably will. It's not going to be the Chinese, despite signing deals, they've been pushing for a long time to have their own currency be the global reserve currency. It won't be. No one's going to be okay with that. I think that commercial owners and partners and big kind of movers and shakers in that world are wary of trading in that currency anyway. So that leaves only one logical option, and that is the crypto world. Are we able to then peg whatever crypto comes into play, whatever token, to a Bitcoin, right? Because it's the new gold. It's essentially creating a new gold reserve for a global currency, which it's going to take a lot of patience to get there. But it doesn't matter if this happens now or 10 years from now. If the path is laid out, again, we've got to be preemptive in a lot of this stuff. And so moves are going to be made before that. And this time-wise, it's all leaning towards certainly coinciding with this next bull cycle and potentially having this next cycle be the mother of all cycles right now. Because, we have a lot of fund managers who want to kind of, again, get out ahead of everything. And we're kind of in a situation where this could be a buy the rumor, but also when the news comes out, it's like buy the news also, because then the path is even more laid out, right? Yeah. So that's where a lot of this excitement is coming from. We also have, and some of you may be familiar with, big voices in the VC space, Chamath Palihapitiya. He kind of, he was a forerunner in all things special acquisition. So he designed, or he didn't design them, he was just one of the first people to jump on board of a resurgence of special acquisition companies. And for anyone not familiar with that, it's essentially companies that go to an IPO with the purpose of raising funds to invest in other companies, right? This SPAC, as they call it, this SPAC space, these special acquisition companies are geared around, more often than not, around new technology sectors. Now, if we're talking about new financial vehicles, platforms, protocols, all being built around, this tokenization or this node operation or whatever, any number of infinite ways that, traditional finance look to leverage the crypto space, do you think that, very forward-thinking VCs with big voices like Chamath isn't going to jump on board with this and kind of change the dynamic of like his SPAC operations? He's going to, special acquisition companies moving and shaking in the crypto world at a much bigger extent sounds like a logical, way forward for me. And so we have all these things moving in unison, and which is why it's important to not understate just the importance of this initial breaking of the barrier with a black rock coming into the space in the way that it has, because it's already shaking a lot of excitement here, meaning that for anyone here who is involved in Hex, pulsechain, and pulsex, firstly, if you didn't get involved in any of the sacrifices, you are not late to the game. You have, it may be around a couple months, a year and a half before we start seeing some major traffic coming in from a lot of these institutions. So we're going to need to wait at least that long for a litmus test to make sure that this thing's operating. But do you think that Richard Hart or some of the money that's flown in from, some of the backers so far is not aware of this? Do you think that some of that Saudi money that's coming are not aware of things on a global macro scale and not kind of reading the writing on the wall here? I think that anyone thinking that price is going to drop and it's going to be a pump and dump, or you're crazy, in my opinion. I'm not a financial advisor, but I'm not afraid to state what I see happening right now, and we should all be very excited.
Well, I think we got to take people's experiential knowledge very seriously, and you're one of these people that actually has these high net worth networks, right? And I'm starting to have the same kind of network, right? I've been in Hex long enough that a lot of my friends are pretty rich too. And it's pretty cool because you start to see kind of where things are heading when you get to these upper echelons. It's like, okay, you have your finger on the pulse a little bit better than the average person. And so, yeah, it's easy to say, oh, screw BlackRock, they suck, all that. But at the end of the day, their interest alone and their willingness to play by the DeFi rules and play in the DeFi ecosystem rather than do what the SEC is trying to do and royally fucking things up by trying to control everything. For them, it's all just about control and relevance and saving face after they screwed up on FTX. And they don't really have as much power as people think they do, right? I mean, it's Congress at the end of the day that makes the laws, but
it is.
The U.S. can go to hell in a handbasket if it makes the wrong choices in crypto, and that's going to come down to legislature, maybe the judicial branch trying to, making some important decisions, but just Congress at the end of the day making better laws that are more crypto friendly. But at the same time, we've got Hong Kong ramping up, being a very crypto friendly. They just released some laws about making it legal for retail to trade. I mean, I don't know if it kind of always was legal in my opinion, but they're basically just trying to be a crypto hub. We've got China also. Singapore. We've got just China in general gearing up. Other parts of the world are gearing up to kind of handle this new crypto revolution in a different way. Whereas the U.S. seems to right now be clinging on to control and just trying to, it's in its last death throes, so to speak.
I would completely agree with that. And I also think it's important to note that, to date, the reason why a lot of this footprint of crypto hasn't really taken off in all these different areas is because we haven't been equipped to deal with it. The infrastructure of crypto in general hasn't been mature enough to handle a lot of this interest. We're in a very different, this is not 4 years ago. This is not 8 years ago. This is now an indicator to the much wider market that, again, it is hilarious to me when I hear people asking me if like crypto is still going to be around in the future. I'm like, how much does the writing need to be on the wall for you guys?
I was feeling that way like at 2015. I was like, oh, this shit will be around forever. Yeah. If it could last from 2011 to 2015, it's not going anywhere. But now it's like 13 years later and people are still scared if it's even going to exist. It's like asking if the internet is going to still be around. It's like the Pandora is out of the box, there's no stopping this when it's just up to how people want to handle it. Whether or not the U.S. I think handles it poorly or better, I think
it will be poorly to begin with. Certainly, in relative speaking,
they don't have they're not off to a good start, that's for sure. And but hey, the good thing is you could always move, right? You have freedom of movement still, fingers crossed, in the United States, and you do have freedom to ultimately renounce citizenship if that's something you wanted to do. That's if shit really hits the fan, right? But all I'm saying is that the cat's out of the bag and BlackRock's in, which is an American U.S. company, right? And so, I mean, it proves to me that
that's what it is. Right now, it's not even to do with the tech. It's nothing like that. It is simply taking advantage of some of the legal precedent in place and being able to tokenize. And there's a lot of nuance to it. It's basically a compartmentalization of the asset itself and then the token and, basically creating a separation there that adheres to this loophole, albeit still having the stability and being backed by the asset itself. So it's going to bring a lot of stability to crypto in general, just by the nature of a lot of this stuff. The other opportunities, who aren't necessarily backed by the actual ETF or the assets themselves, who knows? I mean, we're talking about countries too, right? You talked a lot about kind of outside of the US. And I think that some of the folks from, certainly a lot of the third world countries who haven't afforded to, be able to treasure their gold reserves, their silver reserves, their commodities, this tokenized approach will allow them to do so, which means that we could start seeing, relatively small players on the global scale come into the market and bringing in huge amounts of revenue because they have no other option. They want to tokenize and treasure their gold reserves, but it's too expensive to do so because of licensing, partnerships, because of all the geographic barriers. If they're able to circumvent a lot of those barriers and still be able to accomplish what they want to accomplish, even that, it's a no-brainer. And that's not even, we don't care about the US in that point. We still got money coming in. We still, for anyone who is in the crypto space, involved in the right projects, you're going to see an insurgence of capital like we've never seen before. And that sounds so bullish and unbelievable to say. I mentioned something along these lines in a previous video, not quite as in depth, but really kind of just the amount of interest we should see. And it was almost like disbelief from some people in the comments there. Not a denial, but more of a really? Like, is this really? Can this have the as big an impact as you're saying? And to date, we haven't seen this. So we could see the next level of crypto. And right now, I think we are in the sweet spot between being early adopters and then being kind of, joining a bandwagon that's already in full run. We're in that sweet spot right now, which is why it's so amazing to have this delayed approach to the Richard Hart ecosystem, for instance. For a lot of us who are super interested or even want to take a piece of the pie for the first time, you can accumulate. You think Hex isn't going to shoot up to all-time highs? Why wouldn't it be? Why wouldn't many other cryptos? If we're talking about Ethereum and Uniswap doing crazy things, you think, Cardano is not going to do the same? You think VeChain's not going to do the same? These are all tokens and ecosystems that are already being implemented on large commercial scales, but they already have an infrastructure. And I think that being early to what will hopefully be, a major player in the crypto space is going to be extremely valuable for all of us. I'm getting off the ride too soon.
I want to show you guys exactly like a visual representation of what Ben's talking about here. So there's a thing called the adoption curve, right? This is not the S curve of adoption, but it's just a simple bell curve that people kind of go by. And so if you look at the screen, you've got, let me find a more clear picture, right? At the very beginning, you've got the innovators, right? This is like from 2011, maybe to 2015, right? People were just getting their hand around what is a blockchain, how does cryptography make us censorship resistant? All the really smart dudes and all the people that got, filthy, insanely rich. Then you've got the early adopters, which is kind of us, right? But then you could see in the middle of early adopters, between the early adopters and early majority somewhere, there's something called a chasm. And the chasm can happen, either it's in the early adopter stage. I've also seen it put right in between the early adopters and the early majority stage. What Ben's talking about is bridging this chasm, right? And so we're right on the cusp. We're on the precipice of the chasm. And Ben, I think you're basically saying, I can see the other side, guys. I can see
absolutely.
where we're going.
I think this is a great example. Yeah.
This is the trigger point. This is the catalyst. The chasm is the credibility factor that launches everything into the mainstream. And of course, you're still going to make money in the early majority. You just don't want to be one of these late majority or laggards, right? I mean, these are just the haters that they're only going to use crypto when they have to use crypto, when everything is priced in crypto, when it's already too late and all the volatility is gone, all the opportunity is off the table. And it kind of goes in tandem with the question that Zach Davis is asking right now. He's like, well, how is there any way to actually take profits without using a centralized exchange? And then this is the Morpheus moment where it's like, what if I told you that one day you won't have to take profits,
Right. Yeah.
And it's what I mean by that is when everybody's accepting cryptocurrency for goods and services, this might be, it could be as early as 5 years from now, maybe 10. You're going to start seeing the floodgates open. And Zach, I could tell you 2 specific examples right now, dude. It's not super ideal, but if you want to go to shopping.io, you can buy anything you want from Walmart, Home Depot, Amazon using crypto. They just buy it for you. They take your crypto, they buy stuff for you. Shopping.io. There's another one called bitrefill.com. And there's a lot of different websites like Bitrefill where you can buy gift cards. So if you were to off ramp some of your Hex without using a centralized exchange, as long as you like the gift cards that are on Bitrefill, they're like, if you want to buy a Chipotle gift card or a Walmart gift card or even an Amazon gift card. Hotels, flights, there's a lot of gift cards available that can fund many different aspects of your lifestyle today. And unfortunately, you can't pay your rent in crypto quite yet. You can't pay your electricity bill in crypto, but that's only a matter of time. And that's, after we cross that chasm that I'm talking about, that Ben's essentially talking about, that's when you kind of are living in this crypto world. So that's what I want people to understand is it could be as early as the next cycle. At the peak of the next cycle, we just need regulatory clarity. We need people to not be afraid that their business is going to get turned off if they decide to accept crypto.
If you were to marry that chart too with a historical kind of S-curve chart, right, where we start seeing the way that technologies tend to gain parabolic momentum as they go forward, crypto obviously being one of those, and various products and protocols within the crypto space absolutely fulfilling that criteria. Well, we're talking about being able to pay your mortgage. Do you think that even in this tokenization realm, that mortgage companies and mortgage backers are not going to tokenize their mortgages? That in itself will open up an easy, streamlined avenue to swap crypto for crypto. We're not talking about necessarily having a future here where you need to cash out for USD. I think that, while that still may be a little bit premature for a lot of people to get their head around, especially if you're, newer to the crypto space and you're just now getting your head around like crypto's here to stay,
Yeah.
we're not too far away. If like I say, if that reserve currency ends up taking the role of a crypto, well, that's changing the dynamic there. You're buying houses, paying credit cards, paying bills, all through crypto, which of course is going to bring its own sanctions, limitations,
Yeah.
control. But we're before that right now. You can set a significant financial foundation by just being involved right now in the right stuff.
Well, so it's a double-edged sword, right? On the bright side, crypto does make transacting a lot easier for everybody. The user experience for me to send you $10,000 of USDC in 30 seconds or less, it's way easier than having to wire transfer through my bank or call my bank and give them my routing number. It's old-fashioned. It's archaic. So
Yep.
the user experience is beyond easier. I mean, using crypto is just makes so much more sense for a business, for peer-to-peer, right? If I want to sell my house to somebody for Bitcoin or for Hex, for example, why shouldn't I be able to do that? Well, that's where the other side of the sword comes in. I mean, you've got basically centralized governments. You've got separation of money and state, right? Back in the day, you had separation of church and state, and that it was messy, right? It was messy. There were a lot of people killed, and the battle was a tough one to fight. Now we're essentially doing the separation of money and state, and it's not going to be, this is the then they fight you part, right? And that Gandhi quote, and then you win. The last part before you win is then they fight you. And so we're going to see a lot of governments battling for the little control that they still have left. And that's going to be, we're seeing it right now. This is basically the SEC, rolling over in its grave, trying to grasp at it, that whatever bits of control that it has left, and the IRS as well, because at the end of the day, it's like, if everyone's using crypto, how are they going to tax you, right? How are they going to tax anybody? The answer for them, the answer would be stop trying to regulate and innovate yourself. Yep. Why doesn't the IRS just make better systems that say, okay, every time you want to do a crypto transaction through this intermediary platform, let's say you want to use crypto to buy a house, maybe we just automatically deduct a 10% tax out of that, right? If they were smart, they'd be going after innovating faster in order to maintain power and maintain some level of tax revenue. But this is really going to decentralize power on a global scale, and it's going to make, when the humans are free, like you can move wherever you want. You're free to pay anybody in whatever currency you want. It's going to be a strange world where it's going to be interesting to see how they try to stop us when it's inevitably an unstoppable force.
For sure. And I think this is one of the catalysts taking place right now where, whether they like it or not, big entities are going to be circumventing a lot of those in-place rules and regulations. Yes, they can probably react by trying to enforce more rules, like you said, but I think innovation is probably the way forward to be able to really get a hold of this. Otherwise, they're just kicking the can down the road.
That's what we're saying with the SEC right now.
Yeah, and maybe then, with the IRS, instead of looking at being defunded, they may actually be looking to, put some actual tech advancements in place, or at least a better control mechanism to grab a hold of this beast, because I'm sure there's a lot of money that they're missing out on right now. It's like the Wild West right now in crypto for the most part. And so, but yeah, I totally agree. And I think that
I don't think the answer to the control is just screaming security at everything. That's like the back in the olden days. It's like, people yelling heresy or is that heresy? I don't know if I said that right, but going against the church, right? You could be in trouble for heresy. And now it's like you can get in trouble for not paying your taxes or not, or being a security, right? And it's like, okay, so what? I'm a security, bro. What does that mean? It means like I can't just take my 12 words in my head and go across to a country that treats me better and use all my money over there. Like, what are you going to do? When everybody has this power, it's going to be too hard to enforce. That's why education is so important right now. We need to teach people, because there's power in numbers, right? If everybody using crypto, if everybody understands self-custody, holding your own keys, buying assets that go up like Hex, wink, wink. I mean, it's going to be a better world to live in, and they can't possibly arrest everybody for tax fraud. You know what I mean? You wouldn't have a country remaining.
Well, the IRS are understaffed anyway, so I mean, they're going to need to have some advancements in the way they handle things. It's going to
even
be
with their
better for
80,000
everyone.
people, even with their.
But I think that, my take on this too, even with just this start with this tokenization, which is massive, that is going to provide certainly a lot of us folks who have been in crypto for a while to look for new opportunities too, and some of the platforms and the vehicles that come up to help this tokenization. That's part of the. I mean, I guess I started my channel, like you said, to really kind of marry traditional finance with crypto and to start bringing in a different perspective and a bit more of a macro outlook, certainly when it comes to finding good investments. And certainly one thing that I am going to be focused on and keeping a very close eye on is these platforms and these other kind of avenues to invest in that come up due to some of these inroads being made. So I'm sure there are going to be the Robin Hoods of the world, of course, that are going to kind of probably jump on this bandwagon and start developing their own expansion. But there are going to also be a lot of front runners who will look to capitalize in this, which could also make for some great investments in the crypto world as well. And lots of these, I assume, will probably be within the Richard Heart ecosystem, as well as based on Ethereum. I imagine initially we're not going to see too many of these. Well, maybe we will, just by the fact that because it's an Ethereum kind of system state copy, we may see that ease of streamlined development on Pulse. But I think that we have a real good opportunity here to not only be aware of this and start reaping the benefits from the investments that we're already in, as well as we mentioned, some of those conservative folks wanted to make money from, an Ethereum, for instance, which may not have the parabolic movement of other platforms like pulsechain, for instance, but it could definitely see some people who are a lot more conservative with much better gains than they would have had. But I think that a lot of these new investment opportunities, these new platforms, these new tokens coming to fruition will provide us with a lot of opportunity to be very early into them. And I'm excited to see where things go. I think that, it's definitely an area in which I feel a lot more comfortable being involved. I love this too.
So this is the meme I was basically bastardizing this meme. Sorry guys, but yeah, what are you trying to tell me is that I can trade my Bitcoin for millions someday? And he's like, no, Neo, I'm trying to tell you that when you're ready, you won't have to. And that's the world that we're all moving towards.
Absolutely. And I just noticed too, a couple of people in the comments were mentioning Aladdin, the AI that BlackRock has, and how it may be in place to pick up on hacks. It may be in place to definitely give them some valuable insights into just how popular and engaging the hex community is. And I think you're absolutely right. I think that I don't know what Aladdin is necessarily searching for, what their criteria is, and how it's being put to use specifically. But absolutely, and then Aladdin's probably not the only one. We may not be aware of some of the various degrees of AI technology that some of these trading platform or entities are using, but absolutely, I think that's the beauty as well of having such an engaging community that interacts a lot with a product. Just look around and see a lot of the people who are advocates of the Richard Heart ecosystem, let alone Richard himself and all of the other catalysts that we've mentioned with various documentaries and outside sources coming in. I think that, yeah, there is a good chance that without Ben Cage out there talking to his network, we may be able to have a lot of that organic awareness being created too.
Yeah, it's everybody has their own network. Everybody has a role to play in the greatest, evolution of since the internet, basically the greatest innovation since the internet. I like to say, crypto democratized money, like the internet democratized information. When everyone has freedom of information, it's a lot easier to get the word out there. And then when all you guys have freedom of money, right? When all you guys have enough crypto to survive, then it's this meme, basically. I remember seeing this meme back in, I think like when I first got into crypto, people were still talking about this. The Bitcoiners were still talking about, because they were kind of the only game in town at that point back in 2015. Yeah, there were some other shit coins, but they were saying, oh yeah, one day, you'll be able to use Bitcoin for payment. And for the for the past 6 or 7 years, that narrative has kind of been bullshit. Nobody's accepting it at stores. It's really hard to use as any kind of a payment currency network. Nobody wants,
but yeah.
yeah, and it's like, well, even if they do accept it, they're just going to sell it right after for US dollars. But here, at this point in time, right on the edge of the chasm, of the early adopters to the early majority, the future has never been more clear to me that this is exactly where we're headed, with pulsechain around the corner, with the SEC having a little hissy fit, with governments around the world just, scared. They're basically scared of losing control. The World Economic Forum, everybody wants you to eat the bugs. This is the way out. This is it. And it's never been more apparent that, I've never been able to see the future more clearly. It was really hard to see this in 2015, but now it just feels inevitable.
It really does. Inevitable is a good word. And again, it's so tough to be, especially for me, a new influencer in the space. For you especially, you've got a huge following, and you always got to be cognizant of saying things that will garner some trust regardless. And so, being able to outline a path without giving people false hope or being one of those hopium moon boys. But in instances like this, it's really tough not to be. And especially, I've seen this take form in so many different ways to much smaller degrees. I think everything up to this point has been a smaller degree, right? The internet, maybe, right, has been kind of similar in comparison. But I don't want people to miss out on an opportunity because, we run the risk going forward as this stuff starts to become more and more apparent. There's going to be a lot of media manipulation. There has to be, right? We've all seen this before. How many times, how many cycles have we seen? Crypto may not be around. There's so many scams, all of that stuff. We're going to see that kick up to the next level as a lot of this stuff starts coming to fruition. Maybe, possibly, even like government orientated, right? We don't know what way this could go, but it's going to be very important for everyone to have the conviction in this, because you may, especially if you're more of a fickle personality, a lot of people are in crypto because it's a constantly evolving landscape. But if you do feel a little bit fickle, just know that certainly to a lot of folks that I'm speaking to, a lot more experienced than me, and I keep saying this, but the writing's on the wall. Like, it's there. It's that blueprint that's being written right now, and the path forward is a very lucrative one if you have patience.
Yep.
If you are able to control your own time horizons and also have faith in being able to hold the course, right? Because you're
don't
not
fall
going to
for
see
the
this
FUD,
again.
guys. The FUD is coming, and I fear that this is going to be politicized, unfortunately. And I fear that crypto regulation, crypto acceptance won't be a bipartisan issue. That's kind of what I see happening right now. And I'm talking about left versus right here. And I don't like talking about this, but just remember that for people that are progressive, right, you should want progress. So it might be a little paradoxical that, maybe you don't agree 100% with the left or the right. And that's the majority of people, right? That's me. That's 99% of people. It's just the crazy people that believe whatever their team is supposed to believe.
Yep.
Well, if your team is supposed to be progressive, you should want progress. You should want innovation in money, right? But unfortunately, I think a lot of people are going to get talked into these narratives, these anti-crypto narratives in the coming months and years, especially, watch election season next year. There might be some propaganda that you need to stay above that, right? You need to educate yourself and help others realize that this is progress, right? This is not going backwards. And people that are afraid of crypto, they're just, what you'd rather, are the banks any better? Like, oh, you're just saying you want bank money now? They're going to try to use every play in their playbook, right? They're going to call you racist, or it's for misogynists, or white supremacists. They're going to make stuff up just because that's the only option in their arsenal that they really have left. But once you realize, I mean, crypto really is for third world countries and people on the fringes that have been outcast by the mainstream, the bigger countries. This is they're using this today in El Salvador and Africa. They're using cryptocurrency today. So to try to say that this is marginalizing people, or it's not an equal opportunity for everyone, it's blatantly false when you look at the reality of what's happening today. Just be careful of the fun, guys. I mean, everybody watching is probably too smart to fall for this, but when your mom or your aunt or your grandma starts saying, well, that seems like a Ponzi scheme, it's like, oh, well, how's your 401k treating you? Have the banks been nice to you your whole life? Or
That's it.
Who's got your best interest at mind here?
And it's interesting too, like, again, when we're talking about just the opportunity we're in right now. And so, we are kind of, as Richard Harder said it, not to use, his words too much, but we are pre-viral. I mean, this could be applied crypto wide, really, but certainly with Hex right now, the price performance that we're seeing now, in my opinion, is minimal compared to where it's going.
Oh, wait, maybe we should end on this topic then, because everybody wants to talk about price. So how high do you think we're going in the near term, and how high do you think we're going in the next bull?
It's so tough to, and everyone says this, right? And I'm not one to shy away from price predictions because, again, I'm not a financial advisor. I am simply giving you my opinion. So please don't hold me to this if things don't go shake out the way they are, but or the way I say they will. But I don't think this is a time to not be bullish. And if you are bullish, I don't think it brings any value to sit on the fence. In my mind, there are some major catalysts coming into play, both into ecosystem and on the macro level. And so I believe now is the best time to be as bullish as you possibly can be. Price performance, I think right now in the short term, right, we've got these catalysts coming up with Hex. We have the testnet v3 announcement, we have the mainnet announcement, then we have, any and all things that come about Richard Hartnett documentary. Yeah, exactly. All of that stuff. So I'm going to use the short term, and I'll say kind of as pulsechain mainnet launches, right? In my opinion, that's short term. I think that as we start getting closer to that and people realize that, hey, you know what? Because of all this liquidity bonding we've talked about, because of price performance in Hex being probably extremely linked to the rest of the ecosystem, maybe it's not going to be a sell the news event, right? So I imagine as we start getting up to that point, we're probably, in my opinion, going to see an all-time high Hex, which sounds ridiculous right now, and I'm not giving myself much time for us to actually attain that. But I think that's well within the realms of possibility. I know a lot of people on the bullish side are saying that we're going to see a 20-cent hex, a 25-cent hex. I think we get to minimal, 40, 45 cents, to be honest with you.
Wow.
Yeah, I think we inevitably see a little bit of a dip then, because there's been a lot of patience in the community. Certainly folks who kind of think that they've missed the boat and not really computing the evolution and the price performance that each consecutive cycle could have, even without all of these external kind of motivators in place. So I think we're inevitably going to see a dip then. Some people are going to take profit. But then I do think it's inevitable, either as a joint value between, P hex, E hex, we're going to start seeing $1 plus, during the next bull cycle. I'm thinking probably more, but I think that dollar is going to be something that we're going to see some I guess push against. We're going to have to break through that barrier to start reaching up higher than that. But I think $1 is definitely in the realms of probability, in my opinion. And I use the word probability because, again, we're going to see a ton of new money coming into the market from all different areas. Plus, we have the benefits and the historical data that shows us that even without all of that, the next cycle and the next cycle makes for some real good price appreciation. Now, pulsechain and pulsex, I've gone back and forth on this so many times, and I'm going to say this. In my opinion, both are going to be spectacular. Now, I've gone, and I'll be honest with you, part of me was really on board with Randy Hilarski's kind of comparison to the turtle and the hare previously, where, we have pulsechain just because of the FOMO of people who missed out on that initial sacrifice coming in, reallocating some of their funds, maybe in that 2-day period beforehand, especially, and then ongoing. I think a lot of those people probably are not going to be as, we've got to play to the sentiment as opposed to like what our logic tells us in the long run. And I think we're probably still going to see that. We're going to see pulsechain come out of the gates a lot stronger than pulsex. Then we're going to see pulsex kind of take on a life of its own. Now, where my mentality before differed was that I was in agreement that, after we see that insurgence of interest in pulsex, we're going to then see pulsechain catch it up and overtake it. This maybe isn't going to be the case anymore if we have a lot of this tokenized assets coming to play. And so a decentralized DEX is going to become even more valuable. And obviously not just that, but as we start seeing that buy and burn due to so much more interaction start really kicking things into gear, there's a real chance that we see uncharted territory for DEXs. And we've talked about this before too. DEXs versus layer ones are not really an apples to apples comparison right now. We haven't got enough data. DEXs have been around 5 minutes, and already they're garnering a lot of attention. But we've only had one cycle, so you can't really compare it to a layer one just yet. And I think that we're going to be able to assess the rest of that runway.
I think so. My opinion on the whole pulse chain versus pulse X is that value accrues at the endpoints over time. So there is a possibility for pulse X to outperform pulse chain on a very long time scale. But I think that we actually do have enough data to know that, at least in the last cycle, all of the layer ones pumped way harder and way higher than all of the DEX coins. Now, the DEX coins also went up, 20x, 100x, maybe even 200x. But the layer one coins went up, and I'm only talking about one cycle, like you said, one cycle of data. Some of the layer one coins went up 2,000, 3,000x, like BNB chain, Phantom, stuff like that. So there's going to be a rush of money, in my opinion, into Pulse Chain because that's going to be where the hype is at to begin with, right? But once Pulse Chain establishes and solidifies itself as, hey, we're here to stay, there's no bugs, it works great, everybody loves the apps on it, that's when the money starts to flow into the apps. And the premier app on Pulse Chain, well, the premier apps are going to be Hex and PulseX. Those are going to be the big two. So I think you're going to see a lot of money flowing into PulseX, but it might not be till year 2, 3, and 4. Whereas in year 1 and 2, I think Pulse Chain is going to kind of be the star of the show.
No, for sure. I do. I will say that, when we're looking back at that data, it's a little bit skewed just due to the fact that layer ones were the only thing for a while. And then we
But
had centralized exchanges, which you couldn't really invest in. So the terrain was a little different, but I totally agree with what you're saying. Just and probably the veneer of that is probably what a lot of the certainly inexperienced people are going to look at. So
yeah,
I agree. Certainly tonality and what is understood in the market may make Pulse Chain kind of come out of the gates a lot stronger. But yeah, and I'll just be clear too. Even when I say that PulseX is going to lag behind Pulse Chain, I think they're both going to be leading the charge over this
oh
next
yeah,
bull cycle,
oh yeah,
regardless. And
totally.
it's funny. I put out on a previous video, mentioning the possibility of, a with Pulse. I think I was either Pulse Chain or PulseX. Both, I think, have a fair shot, and we're going to see how things play out. But I think that I mentioned something around a 5 cent price point, and that was so unbelievable to someone in my comments. I can't remember who it was, who was like, "No way, that's astronomical." And I'm like, that's a 500x by 2025. I think the question was like, that's very, very conservative to me. Like, we have seen a crypto landscape that has been way less appealing in the past. We've seen layer ones and ecosystems that have been way less appealing. We have more value propositions now, both macro and intra ecosystem, than we ever have before. And so why wouldn't, with more money coming in, more interest, and more compelling reasons to invest, would we not see more of a, and knowing that market cap is an erroneous number for a lot of the measurements that we were looking to measure things on, why wouldn't we see a much bigger interest and a much bigger price performance? It's just a no-brainer to me. It makes sense. And I'm just one viewpoint. I completely get that. And I know a lot of people are looking to be conservative just to kind of cover their ass a little bit if things don't shake out that way. Right now, I'm not seeing too many indicators that things won't shake out that way, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, yeah, it seems pretty great. And as far, I mean, I agree with you. Everything's gonna do great, phenomenal. As far as hex price predictions, like you mentioned, we've got the test net, we've got potential for documentary, potential for Pulse Chain launch itself, and also the liquidity conditions. The environment right now leaves a pretty open range from 7 cents to 12 cents. So in the near term, we could go as high as 12. I like what you're saying about even potentially reaching new all-time highs when Pulse Chain launches. I could see us going to $1 or maybe like 70, 80 cents on the announcement of Pulse Chain launch, just because it's going to be incredible. But then
It'll happen
Pulse Chain
fast.
launches, I think we dip back down temporarily. Maybe we even go under 50 cents for a while. Maybe we're somewhere between like 30 and 60 for, who knows? It could be a full year up until maybe that later part of 2025 when the bull market catches up. So Hex
It's going to
might
be
behave
important to
kind of
keep
weird.
your bags. It's going to be important to get that copy, because this is probably something for later videos, but that liquidity kind of like bonding, and that I guess the the indicator showing that parity can happen a lot faster basically than what we think. I think the risk of selling before you get that copy, even if we do see a spike, is outweighed by the benefit and the reward from two separate chains then reaching parity wherever that parity may be. Because I doubt we'll see a parity that is like super low. It doesn't make sense to me. We're going to see a parity that is at least, around, 40, 50 cents. If we do especially go, and not, maybe not right away, but it will climb there. There's no motivation for EHEX to die away. There's no motivation for PHEX to run away in price. There really isn't. And I think that, there are a lot of variables people are not really considering with just how linked these prices are going to be. And so I agree. I think that, maybe I do think all-time highs on ETH as we start that run up. And I also think that is going to happen in days and weeks. I mean, I think that, we see how quickly price can move. And I think that especially now, as a lot of weak hands have been shaken out, especially now as we start getting closer, and maybe a lot of the people involved already have that inbuilt kind of conditioning of delayed gratification and more of this money coming into play. I really do believe that there's a big chance of hitting those all-time highs very, very quickly. And anyone now, we're seeing price do this right now, and it's amazing to me. People are selling because they see a cent increase, and it's those traders that are going to miss out. It's those traders. I mean, some of them may get lucky and time it, I guess, if you're monitoring it night and day and you're playing with big enough bags. For the majority of us, simplify things. Keep it until we get the main net. You're an idiot if you don't do that.
Buy your bag and then go pump your bag. Tell more people. I mean, it sounds dirty, right? Oh, pumping your bag, it's dirty. It's just adoption. And how do you get adoption? Education. Education. How do you educate people? You talk. You use your words. Get off your ass and just go tell people about it. tell people why the value prop is what it is, and tell people about just crypto in general. The value prop of Hex and pulsechain is the value prop of all of crypto. Adoption, user experience, free peer-to-peer digital cash worldwide, stores of value, censorship resistance, no middlemen, replacing the banks. It's all there. And this is just the next generation of all that stuff. So price predictions, they're all going to go up at the end of the day. That's my prediction. Yeah. But it's a good place to end.
Whole new bar.
Do you have any last kind of things you want to shill or last thoughts?
Not yet. I mean, keep subscribe to my channel if you're watching this. I'd love to get as many people in my community growing. It's been some great growth. I think since the last time we spoke, it's doubled, which has been great. I try to keep things direct. I mean, usually these live streams are the longest kind of form of communication that I have. I usually try to get to the point pretty quick, and so that to make it digestible. But I'm going to be keeping everyone up to speed with what I'm looking at from some of these new areas that are opening up before us, as well as giving you my take on where I've analyzed in terms of potential projects right now. And people have asked me this before. I'm not a channel necessarily dedicated to the Richard Heart ecosystem. I'm a channel dedicated to opportunity, and right now this is the biggest opportunity that I'm seeing. So
I like that. It's an outside perspective that we really value, people outside of our echo chamber. And even though you're participating in our echo chamber right now, like I think your life experience, it has a lot to offer to people who need to think necessarily like outside of just a crypto perspective. A lot of us need to think that way because we need to realize that what's going on in the real world. So guys, go like and subscribe to Ben Cage at Ben Cage on YouTube, Twitter. If you haven't already, what are you doing with your life? Go do it right now. As always,
and I'm hoping to bring in some of these folks I'm talking about as well. So if I can do some interviews on my channel, maybe we do some joint interviews. I'd love to have someone like yourself who's being purely kind of in the crypto space for the most part, adding your perspective, because it's going to differ from mine. But I see some real interesting conversations with some of the guys behind the scenes at some of these big institutions.
I'd love to
really give us a good sense. Yeah, I think.
I'd love to set some more stuff up in the future, bring on some other connections. It's always just good to get different perspectives. So, guys, you know where to find me. If you're brand new to crypto and none of this made any sense at all, hexpassiveincome.com is my course. Takes you from zero to hero, teaches you all about crypto and Hex, how to get Hex, how to stake it. And if you just want to hang out, ask me questions, join my Patreon, Crypto Coffee 369 on Patreon as well. Link in the description below. Other than that, it's Crypto Coffee 369 on everything. Like and subscribe. I hope y'all enjoyed the stream. And I'll see you on the next one. Bye, guys.